There is a quiet fear that doesn't arrive with panic or noise. It arrives as absence, a subtle dimming of color in moments that once felt alive, laughter that sounds correct but feels distant, sadness that should hurt but doesn't. Emotion doesn't disappear suddenly, it fades politely, it leaves slowly, without asking permission. And one day the fear is no longer about being hurt, it is about feeling nothing at all. The fear of becoming emotionally numb is not a fear of pain, it is a fear of disconnection, from joy, from sorrow, from meaning, from the quiet proof that you are still here, still human. This fear lives in people who once felt deeply, and it asks a single haunting question: what happens when the heart learns to survive by shutting down? It rarely announces itself. Emotional numbness does not arrive as a dramatic collapse or a sudden silence. It arrives quietly, almost politely, disguised as calm. At first, it feels like relief. After periods of emotional unsettledness, stress, disappointment, or long endurance, there is a strange easing. The sharp edges soften, reactions slow, tears no longer come as ease, anger loses its heat, even joy feels lighter, quieter, less demanding. Nothing feels wrong. In fact, something feels easier. This is often why numbness goes unnoticed. Life continues to function, conversations still happen, responsibilities are met, smiles appear at the appropriate moments. From the outside, everything looks stable. From the inside, there is simply less noise, less disturbance, less feeling. And yet, beneath that calm, something subtle begins to ache. Moments that once carried weight begin to feel flat. Music no longer reaches the chest. Good news is received with politeness instead of excitement. Bad news is acknowledged without much reaction. Emotional events pass through without leaving much behind. It is not sadness. It is not happiness. It is the absence of contrast. People often struggle to name this experience because language is built around feeling something. But numbness is defined by what is missing. There is no sharp pain to point to, no clear grief to process, just a quiet distance between the self and the emotional world, and so it is ignored. There is a belief that not feeling much is better than feeling too much, that emotional neutrality means strength, that calmness means control, especially in a world that overwhelms so easily. Emotional quiet can feel like maturity, but emotional numbness is not peace. It is disconnection wearing the mask of stability. Over time, this distance becomes more noticeable. There is a growing sense of watching life rather than inhabiting it. Days blend together. Memories feel thin. Experiences lose texture. Even rest does not feel restorative. Because rest requires presence and presence requires feeling. People describe it in simple ways. I feel empty. I don't feel like myself. It's like I'm behind glass. But emptiness is misleading. What feels empty is often full of emotion that has been placed out of reach. The realization usually arrives gently. It comes during moments that are supposed to matter. A celebration that feels muted. A goodbye that doesn't hurt the way it should. A moment of beauty that fails to move anything inside. That is when the fear begins. Not the fear of pain, but the fear of losing emotional depth altogether. The fear that something essential has gone missing, that the ability to feel has eroded quietly, without permission, without warning. This fear is often accompanied by guilt. There is shame in not responding correctly to life. Shame in not feeling grateful enough, sad enough, moved enough. People begin to wonder if something is wrong with them, if they have become cold, or broken, or incapable of care. But emotional numbness is not a failure of character. It is not indifference. And it is not the absence of humanity, it is a response. It is what happens when the emotional system has learned that feeling deeply is unsafe, overwhelming, or unsustainable. It is the nervous system lowering the volume to survive prolonged intensity. The tragedy is that numbness protects by disconnecting not only from pain, but from meaning. And so, the first step is not fixing. It is recognizing that numbness is not nothing. It is a state, a signal, a language spoken by a mind and body that have endured more than they could openly process. This chapter is not about forcing feeling back. It is about naming the quiet shift when feeling began to fade. Because awareness is the beginning of reconnection. And noticing numbness is not the end of emotional life. It is the moment the heart quietly admits it has been holding its breath. Emotional numbness does not emerge from nowhere. It has a history. Long before feeling disappeared, something overwhelmed the system. Something lingered without resolution. Something asked for more emotional energy than was available at the time. Often, numbness begins after emotions were felt too intensely, for too long, without relief. grief that had no space to soften, stress that never truly ended, disappointment repeated until hope became exhausting, caregiving without rest, love given without safety. The emotional system is not infinite. It absorbs, reacts, processes, but it also reaches capacity. When pain is continuous rather than acute, the mind looks for ways to reduce exposure, not by solving the pain, but by dulling the experience of it. This is where numbness quietly begins. It starts as emotional conservation. Feeling less becomes a form of endurance. If emotions are costly, then distance becomes efficient. The body learns that reducing emotional response is safer than remaining open. Importantly, this process is not conscious. There is no decision to shut down, no clear moment of choice. The system adapts automatically the way it always has, by prioritizing survival over richness. In many cases, the origins of numbness are rooted in emotional environments where feeling fully was discouraged or punished, where vulnerability was misunderstood, where emotional expression created conflict rather than connection. In such environments, emotions are not met, they are managed. Over time, this teaches a quiet lesson. Feeling deeply is risky. It disrupts, it complicates, it invites disappointment. So the system adapts. Other times, numbness grows from repeated emotional injury. When trust is broken again and again, when effort is not reciprocated, when care does not lead to safety, the emotional response, once strong and hopeful, slowly retreats, not because it is weak but because it is tired. There is also numbness born from responsibility, from being the stable one, the one who cannot fall apart, the one others depend on. In these roles, emotions become inconvenient. There is no space to feel fully because functioning must come first, and so feeling is postponed. But postponed emotions do not disappear, they wait. The body and mind store what cannot be expressed. Over time, this storage becomes heavy, and numbness becomes a way to reduce the weight, not by releasing it, but by sealing it away. This is why emotional numbness often follows periods described as getting through, holding it together, or being strong. These phrases sound resilient, but they often mask prolonged emotional suppression. Numbness is not weakness. It is what happens when strength is used without rest. Another quiet origin lies in unpredictability. When emotional environments are unstable, alternating between warmth and withdrawal, safety and threat, the system learns to stay neutral. Emotional neutrality becomes protection against disappointment. Better to expect little, better to feel less. Over time, this expectation becomes default. Emotional intensity is flattened preemptively. Joy is softened before it can become fragile. Sadness is muted before it can become overwhelming. That's flattening is not emotional death. It is emotional self-defense. Understanding this origin matters, because without understanding, numbness feels like a betrayal of the self. With understanding, it becomes a story of endurance. There is compassion hidden in this pattern. The system did not shut down randomly. It responded intelligently to conditions that made openness costly. But adaptation has consequences. What once protected begins to limit. What once reduced pain begins to reduce connection. And the same mechanism that numbed suffering also numbs joy, curiosity, desire, and meaning. This is when numbness stops being useful. But before it can change, it must be seen clearly, not as a problem to fix, but as a response to honor, a sign that something once mattered deeply enough to overwhelm the system. Emotional numbness begins where feeling exceeded safety, where expression outpaced support, where survival required restraint. And understanding this origin does not reopen pain all at once. It simply reframes the experience. Numbness is not the absence of emotion. It is the memory of emotion held too carefully for too long. When emotional numbness sets in, it can feel mysterious, even alarming. But beneath the quiet absence of feeling, there is a precise psychological process unfolding. The mind is not malfunctioning, it is regulating. At the center of emotional numbness is the nervous system, specifically, its role in managing threat, safety, and overwhelm. When emotional intensity exceeds what the system can process, it shifts states not to eliminate emotion, but to contain it. This shift is often described as emotional shutdown or blunting. In psychological terms, it is closely related to dissociation, not the dramatic dissociation portrayed in fiction, but a subtle distancing from internal experience. Dissociation exists on a spectrum. At one end, there is mild emotional detachment. At the other, there is complete disconnection. Emotional numbness lives in the quieter middle where awareness remains, but emotional resonance fades. the brain regions involved in emotional processing, particularly the limbic system, begin to reduce activity. This is not damage, it is modulation. The system is lowering intensity to prevent overload. At the same time, areas responsible for monitoring and control become more active. The mind shifts toward observation rather than immersion. Experience is registered intellectually rather than emotionally. This is why numbness often feels like watching life happen instead of participating in it. From an evolutionary perspective, this response makes sense. In situations where escape is impossible and stress is prolonged, reducing emotional engagement preserves functioning. It allows survival in conditions that would otherwise be unbearable. But the nervous system does not distinguish between physical and emotional threat. Emotional pain, rejection, loss, chronic stress activates the same survival pathways. When these pathways remain active for too long, the system defaults to shut down. Another contributing factor is emotional exhaustion. Emotions require energy. Processing, regulating, and expressing feeling is metabolically demanding. When the system is depleted, emotional expression becomes minimal, not by choice, but by necessity. This is why numbness is often accompanied by fatigue, not just physical tiredness, but a deeper a sense that even feeling would take too much effort. There is also the role of neurotransmitters. Prolonged stress affects dopamine and serotonin pathways, chemicals involved in pleasure, motivation, and emotional balance. When these systems are disrupted, emotional range narrows, pleasure dulls, motivation flattens, emotional highs and lows compress into neutrality. This neurological shift does not mean emotions are gone. They are still processed, just at a depth that does not reach conscious awareness. This is why emotional numbness can coexist with anxiety, irritability, or sudden emotional outbursts. What is suppressed does not vanish, it leaks. Importantly, emotional numbness is not depression, though they can overlap. Depression often carries heaviness, sadness, or despair. Numbness carries absence, a blankness where emotion should be. This distinction matters, because numbness is often misunderstood even by those experiencing it. People assume they are detached, apathetic, or ungrateful, but what they are experiencing is regulation, not indifference. The mind has prioritized stability over richness, and once this state becomes familiar, it can become habitual. The nervous system learns that reduced emotional engagement feels safer. Over time, it stops checking whether the threat is still present. It maintains distance by default. This is not stubbornness, it is conditioning. Understanding the psychology of shutdown removes blame. It replaces self-judgment with context. It reframes numbness as a phase, not an identity, because the system that learned to shut down is the same system capable of reopening when safety, capacity, and permission slowly return. Emotional numbness is not a broken signal, it is a signal turned down to protect the whole. And recognizing this is not about forcing feeling back online, it is about understanding why the system went quiet in the first place. Once emotional numbness is recognized, a new tension appears, not from the outside but within. There is a quiet conflict between the part that longs to feel again and the part that learned not to, between curiosity and caution, between desire for emotional depth and fear of what that depth might uncover. This resistance is not obvious. It does not always present as fear. Sometimes it appears as indifference, sometimes as distraction, sometimes as a belief that feeling is unnecessary or overrated. But beneath these layers is a simple truth. Feeling again means risking pain. Numbness, for all its costs, offers predictability. It keeps emotional experience within manageable limits. Reopening emotional access threatens to destabilize that balance. The system remembers what intensity felt like, and it remembers why it shut the door. This is why attempts to feel more often stall. Why emotional openness feels exhausting rather than relieving. Why moments of connection are followed by withdrawal. There is an unspoken negotiation happening internally. The system asks, is it safe now? Is there enough capacity? Will this lead to overwhelm again? Until these questions are answered not logically, but experientially, the resistance remains. This resistance is not laziness, it is self-preservation. Often it is accompanied by a fear of emotional flooding, the concern that once feelings return they will arrive all at once, that grief will overwhelm, that anger will erupt, that sadness will swallow stability. So the system holds the line. There is also resistance rooted in identity. Over time, numbness reshapes self-perception. People begin to see themselves as calm, detached, emotional neutrality becomes part of who they are. Letting go of numbness feels like letting go of control or of a version of the self that survived. This can be disorienting. If feeling returns, who will they become? How will they respond? Will they recognize themselves? Another layer of resistance comes from external expectation. In many environments, emotional expression is still unsafe. Vulnerability is misunderstood. Emotional sensitivity is minimized. In such contexts, reopening emotional access feels risky not just internally, but socially, so the system stays guarded. Resistance also appears as impatience, a desire to fix numbness quickly, to force emotion back through stimulation, distraction, or intensity. But the system resists being rushed. It learns slowly, and it reopens slowly. This mismatch creates frustration. The desire to feel clashes with the body's reluctance to cooperate, and this is where many people turn against themselves. They interpret resistance as failure, as emotional deficiency, as proof that something is permanently wrong. But resistance is not the enemy. It is the voice of caution that it exists because something once hurt deeply enough to change the system's behavior. And until that history is acknowledged, resistance will persist. The turning point is not pushing through resistance. It is listening to it, understanding that numbness was not chosen and neither is the pace of its release. That the system will not reopen simply because it is told to. It reopens when it senses safety, capacity, and permission. This chapter is not about overcoming resistance. It is about respecting it, because resistance is not blocking healing. It is guarding it. And when that guard begins to trust again slowly, quietly, the door to feeling does not burst open. It opens just enough to let life back in, one sensation at a time. The moment of realization does not arrive with certainty. It arrives with a pause, a small interruption in the familiar quiet, a subtle awareness that numbness is no longer just a background state. It is something being noticed, observed, felt, in its own way. This realization often comes unexpectedly, not during deep reflection but during ordinary moments. A memory that should carry emotion but doesn't. A connection that feels distant despite effort. A sudden awareness of how long it has been since something truly moved the inner world. It is not dramatic. It is sobering that there is a recognition that numbness is not neutral anymore. That it has costs. That something essential has been set aside for too long. And with that recognition comes grief. Not the grief of loss, but the grief of absence. Grief for the emotional life that once existed, for the intensity, the color, the responsiveness that used to define experience. This grief is often quiet and wordless. It doesn't always bring tears. Sometimes it appears as heaviness, sometimes as longing, sometimes as a sudden, unexplained sadness that has no clear object, but it is grief nonetheless. The realization also reframes the past. People begin to see their emotional shutdown not as a flaw, but as a response to something that mattered. They remember moments when feeling deeply was necessary and moments when it became unsustainable. This reframing is gentle. It replaces judgment with context, and context allows compassion to emerge. There is also a moment of honesty here, an acknowledgement that numbness has been doing important work, but that its work may no longer be needed in the same way. This is not a rejection of numbness. It is a recognition of timing. The system that once protected now feels too limiting. The walls that once provided shelter now block light. This realization does not immediately restore feeling. It simply changes the relationship with numbness. It becomes something that can be approached rather than avoided, observed rather than denied. In this moment, people often notice small emotional flickers. A brief ache during a song, a sudden tightness in the chest during a memory, a fleeting warmth during connection. These flickers are not overwhelming. They are subtle, almost fragile, but they are significant. They suggest that feeling was never gone, only held at a distance. This is where fear and hope coexist. Hope that feeling can return, fear of what it might bring with it. The system remains cautious, but curiosity begins to soften resistance. Importantly, this realization does not demand change. It does not require immediate action. It does not insist on emotional performance. It simply invites honesty, an honesty that says, something inside has been quiet for a long time, and it deserves acknowledgement. This acknowledgement is a form of presence, and presence, even without strong emotion, is a shift. There is dignity in this moment, a quiet courage in naming numbness without trying to escape it, in allowing the experience to exist as it is, without judgment or urgency, because realization is not the end of numbness. It is the end of confusion about it, and once numbness is understood, it no longer holds the same power. It becomes part of the story, not the conclusion. the emotional system begins to listen again, not to demands, but to safety, to pacing, to permission. And slowly, without force, the question changes, not why can't I feel, but what would it take to feel safely again? Healing, in the context of emotional numbness, does not arrive as intensity. It arrives as permission. Permission to feel little by little, permission to feel inconsistently, permission to feel without needing to explain or perform. This stage is often misunderstood. Many expect healing to look like emotional release does, breakthroughs, dramatic return of feeling. But for numbness, healing is quieter. It is the slow restoration of sensitivity, not the sudden return of depth. The nervous system does not reopen all at once. It tests, it listens, it waits for signs that feeling can exist without overwhelming consequence. So, healing begins subtly. It might appear as noticing sensation rather than emotion, the warmth of sunlight, the texture of a familiar object, the rhythm of breath. These moments may not feel emotional, but they are relational. They re-establish connection between awareness and experience. From there, emotional integration follows gently. Feelings emerge in fragments: brief sadness, fleeting joy, mild irritation. These are not signs of instability. They are signs of reactivation. Importantly, healing does not mean feeling everything again. It means restoring range, the ability to feel some response to experience without shutting down or flooding. This process requires safety more than effort. The system opens when it senses consistency, not pressure, when emotional expression does not lead to punishment, abandonment, or overwhelm. This is why forcing emotion often backfires. Intensity does not equal healing, and emotional stimulation without safety can reinforce shutdown. Integration respects pacing. It allows numbness to loosen its grip gradually, not as an enemy, but as a protector that no longer needs to work as hard. There is also grief in healing. As feelings return, they often bring awareness of what was missed, of moments lived at a distance, of connections that passed quietly. This grief is not regression. It is part of reconnection. And alongside grief comes something else: curiosity, a gentle interest in internal experience, a willingness to notice rather than control, to allow emotion to arise and pass without needing to define it. This curiosity signals trust. The system begins to believe that feeling can be survived. Healing is not linear. There will be days of openness and days of retreat. This fluctuation is not failure. It is regulation and progress, the system learning balance after long periods of constraint. Integration means accepting this rhythm, not demanding consistency, not interpreting distance as loss. It also means redefining what emotional presence looks like. It does not require constant depth. It does not demand intensity. Emotional health includes calm, neutrality, and quiet. The difference is choice. In healing, numbness becomes an option rather than a default, a state that can come and go, rather than one that dominates. This stage is less about becoming emotional and more about becoming available. Available to experience, to response, to meaning. And availability is enough, because emotional life is not measured by how much is felt, but by whether feeling is allowed. Healing does not restore a past version of the self. It creates a new relationship with emotion, one shaped by awareness, boundaries, and respect for capacity. And slowly, without announcement, life begins to register again, not in overwhelming waves, but in quiet signals that say, connection is possible. There is a subtle miracle in returning to feeling, not the grand spectacle of tears or laughter, but the quiet acknowledgement that the inner world is awake again, that the heart, once muted, can speak in whispers, fragments, and soft pulses. Becoming human again is less about recovering what was lost, and more about discovering what remains. The mind remembers, the body remembers, and slowly, the self remembers how to inhabit experience. Not perfectly, not constantly, but honestly. Moments of beauty begin to register. A melody resonates, a smile feels warmer, a memory carries its original weight, and even fleeting discomfort is recognized as evidence of presence rather than evidence of failure. There is a new gentleness in this awareness. People begin to understand that numbness was never absence of humanity. It was survival. And survival, after all, is an intimate proof of resilience. Being human again is not about controlling emotion. It is about observing it, allowing it, and letting it move when it wishes. It is about listening to subtle stirrings rather than demanding intensity. Feeling becomes less about drama and more about acknowledgement. the mind and body responding in dialogue rather than conflict. In this phase, the past of numbness is no longer a shameful chapter. It is a testament, a reminder of the system's intelligence, the endurance of the self, and the possibility of reconnection. Emotional depth is no longer expected to be permanent. It is accepted as fluctuating, like tides that ebb and return. This acceptance brings a quiet dignity. The self is no longer measured by constant engagement but by presence, by readiness, by the courage to inhabit life gently, in moments both vibrant and calm. And in these moments, there is a poetic truth. Feeling is not always dramatic, but it is always meaningful. The ability to register even a flicker of emotion is proof of life, proof of connection, proof of being. The fear of numbness fades not because feeling is suddenly restored, but because there is recognition that life does not require intensity to be valid. Presence itself, however subtle, is enough. To feel again, even softly, is to return home, to the body, to the mind, to the heartbeat that quietly insists, you are here, you are human, you are enough. And so, the journey ends not with a crescendo, but with the gentle return of awareness, a heart slowly reopening to life, one sensation at a time. The silence is no longer empty. It is full of possibility. The numbness that once protected now rests in the past, and presence, patient, gentle, imperfect, is the proof that the self can endure, connect, and be awake again.